Hello and welcome to Distress Tolerance Session 3. So, in order to get the most out of this session, just going to check out whether we've got everything we need. So pad of paper and a pen would be really helpful. We're going to be using the Marsha Linehan handouts and worksheets. So that's handouts 5 and 9 and worksheets 3 and to 3A. Worksheets 7 and to 7B. Okay, so if you've not got them to hand, just pause and get those ready. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to check out whether we need to change anything in how we're sitting, what we need to do to focus our mind on the videos so that we can get as much as we possibly can out of the presentation. So maybe just moving around a bit, scanning yourself from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. What do you notice? Is there anything you need to change? Is there anything in the environment that might be a bit distracting? Do you need to remove that, or can you change where you're sitting? Just spend a few moments and then we'll start. We're going to be looking at 2 distress tolerance skills. One is pros and cons, and the other one is improve the moment. So when we're in crisis, when our emotions are really high, we have very, very strong urges to do things that are not terribly good for us. And these urges look really attractive because they look like it's going to take the pain away. And that's the illusion, isn't it? It's going to take it away and then everything will be okay because I won't have to stand this moment. However, frequently what happens is we either make things really a lot worse, or the consequences of doing those things come back to bite us. So what we need to do is find ways of looking at both sides so that we're looking at wise mind, preferably at times when we're not experiencing those strong urges, so that we can draw on these pros and cons when we need to. So first of all, just pause and write down what are the common urges that you have when you are in a high state of emotion, or when you're in a crisis. What's your urge? Then jot down what your patterns are of perhaps avoiding what needs to be done. Or what is your pattern of being tempted to sort of give up on things with? And just jot those down, because we all have them, don't we? We develop patterns of things we avoid because we don't really want to do them, and yet they could be good for us in the long term. And we also develop patterns of giving up on things, perhaps not giving them a chance, as well as urges that we want to act on at times of high stress. Sometimes it can be really useful to make a list as well of your long-term goals. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to head to? Make a few notes. Look at the crossroads that you come to in your life. Which path do you choose? Sometimes a path can look really attractive, but it might not be the right one. And instead think about, where do I want to be going? What do I want to be heading for in the longer term? What might that look like? And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what it's like to complete a pros and cons list. So this is slightly different from other lists that you might compile, because you'll notice that it's got 4 squares, and quite frankly this can take a lot of getting your head around, but let's have a go. Okay, so the first, you'll notice there's 2 columns, pros and cons, but in the first square this is the pros, the advantages of acting on those crisis urges. So the advantages, the pros of either acting on the urge, giving in, giving up, or avoiding what needs to be done. So in order to do this, I have taken my own urge, which is to eat lots of chocolate in the evening if I've had a very stressful day. So what are the advantages of doing that? So if I give in to that urge, what do I get? Well, I get immediate relief. It's really stimulating and it tastes great, usually. I am associating it with me time. So I'm associating it with treating myself like a reward. It feels a bit naughty at times, like it's something that I would sort of goes with that me time, something I can just do on my own. And it gives me an energy boost because obviously there's a vast quantities of sugar in that. It allows me an escape and I'm able to really enjoy that moment. However, what are the cons to that? So the cons of acting on this urge is that it is really unhealthy. It's not good for my body. And once I start eating and I've given in, then I search for more and I become more focused on that. And quite frankly, it just doesn't taste as good the more I eat of it. So after the first bite, to be honest, I'm not sure that I'm getting as much enjoyment out of it. And I feel guilty. I feel bad about myself because it doesn't really address my longer term goals, which is to be healthy and fit. It also doesn't stress the problem of why I was stressed in the first place. So let's look at the other columns. What about the pros of resisting that urge to eat chocolate? So what are the advantages for me if I was able to resist it? Well, I know I'd feel good about myself. I know I feel healthier. I'd feel closer to long-term goals of being healthy, fit, and fitting into my clothes, which is always handy. It would also motivate me to think of alternatives, and it would allow me to problem solve, because one of the things we do when we're acting on those urges is we're just going for an easy fix in that moment. We're not addressing the longer term issues and thinking about things that might help those. So then the last box is, what are the cons of resisting that urge to eat chocolate? And what we notice with this is that they're all feelings. I feel deprived, restless, bored, and it can be hard work resisting that urge. So the great thing about this is that when you do these boxes, what you normally find is this last box is all about managing feelings. And we have techniques for that. So there's lots of things that I can do that help me manage feelings of being deprived, restless and bored. And lots of techniques that allow me to stay with things. So I can do something about that. Have a go at doing the pros and cons with something on your list that feels like it's manageable. So don't go for the hardest one. Stick with something that's manageable and see what you discover. So the next skill we're going to look at is improve the moment. And I really want to highlight something about expectations here. Because when we think of improve the moment, I don't know about you, but I think improve the moment is like transforming it. So my expectations, if I'm thinking about improving the moment, are really quite high. But actually we don't need that. All we need to do is to make it slightly more manageable. So if you look at these two pictures and you look at the top one, in order to improve that moment, all you need to do is just lighten it slightly. And that's what we're trying to do when we're using this as a distress tolerance skill. We're just trying to take the edge off. We're just trying to make the amount of emotion that we're feeling manageable in that moment. So that does not mean that it is transformed into something amazing, but just that it looks a little bit easier to cope with. And there are lots of ways that we do that, and I'm going to go through them with you now. The first letter of the improve skill is I, and that stands for imagery. So when we're feeling really stressed, overwhelmed, when our emotions are high, sometimes what we need to do is take refuge in something that feels safe and secure, if only for a moment. Imagery is something that can be very individual with people, and some of the easiest ways is to use visual imagery, which might not work for some people. And there are different ways of doing that. So it might be associating it with a sound, or it might be associating with something that you can touch, or even just a movement that you do. We're just going to look at imagery as in a visual sense at the moment. So what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that when you're under stress, what you're trying to do is create a situation that's different from the one that you're actually in. You're creating a safe and secure space for yourself in your mind. So we're going to have a bit of an experiment with this and see what comes up for you. Okay, so first of all, what I want you to do is I want you to just breathe deeply, take a few deep breaths, and just allow yourself just to go within yourself and to access wise mind. And I want you to imagine that whilst you're in wise mind, you're building a safe room that you can go to seek refuge when you need to, that's inside you. And in order to build this room that's safe and secure for you, you need to design it. You need to have a think about what it looks like for you. So what colour would you have? What furniture would you put in there? What would you put in the room to make yourself feel safe? You can have anything you like in this room because it's your room, you're creating it. You can have animals in the room. You can have nature in the room. You can even imagine that your safe, secure space, your room, is like the TARDIS, that when you go in it, it's bigger than anything you've seen before. You can make your room invisible so that nobody else can see it but you. And if you wanted to, you could put any fantasy creature you like in there. Sometimes it's really handy to just have Superman sat in the corner of your room, ready to bounce up and protect you if he's needed. Others of you may prefer other fantasy characters that mean something to you. It doesn't really matter what it is. You can have whatever you like in your room. You can just make it yours. And the beauty of this is that it's a bit like putting on the pause button. So you can say to yourself, actually, things are feeling really quite overwhelming at the moment. I'm just going to go inside myself and take some time out in my room. Now this takes a bit of practice. The more you practice, the great news is the easier it is to do. Have a play with it. After I comes M for meaning. This is a really tricky one in a lot of ways, but if you can spend some time thinking about it when you're feeling calm, it can really help. Additionally, if you have a look at the values and priorities list, which is Emotion Regulation Handout 18, what's useful about that list is it helps you identify some of the things in life that are really important to you and what sort of purpose in life you'd like. And if you imagine doing some of those, you allow yourself to immerse yourself in that experience and really get hold of it. What are the things that are important to me in my life? What you'll notice from this slide is that there are two bookshots up here. One's by Viktor Frankl, which is Man's Search for Meaning, and that was written in 1946. And Viktor wrote this book following the Second World War, and he wrote it based on his experiences in the concentration camps, because he wanted to write about what it was like in there and what helped people survive. And it was the thought of writing this book whilst he was in the concentration camp that kept him going. That was his search for meaning at that dreadful time. And there's a couple of quotes that Viktor makes that I really like and help me in my life, and I think that's half the battle here, is finding things that speak to you that you can hold on to. So the first quote is, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So sometimes that helps me when I'm going through difficult times in my life. Look at how actually maybe there is a different meaning for this. Maybe part of the plan here is to actually challenge myself and grow through this. Think about what I can learn from this situation. And the other quote that I really like is, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And that really speaks to me, because sometimes when you feel that there is absolutely nothing that you have any control over, the one thing you do have some control over is your reaction to it. On a slightly more lighter note, the other book that really speaks to me is Pollyanna. And that was written in 1913. Now, I think that Pollyanna gets some bad press sometimes because people assume that it's all about being endlessly optimistic. I suppose I see it slightly differently than that. What I really like about this book is the glad game. And I like the glad game not because it distorts reality or makes things seem better than they are, but because it looks for something that you can be glad about in that situation. The advantage of being able to do that is it forces your brain to search for something. So in a way, it's a sort of distraction as well as trying to find a meaning in something. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Pollyanna story, this poor little girl goes through a rough ride in her life. First of all, her mother dies at childbirth, and she's brought up by her father, who is a minister but who lives in very deprived circumstances as a missionary. And as she's growing up, she doesn't have many belongings, and once a year she is allowed to order one thing from the women, I think it's called the Women's Mission or something like that. Anyway, so she orders a doll, and she's so excited about this doll. Anyway, this package arrives and it is huge, so you can imagine, can't you, thinking massive doll. They open it up, and inside this box is a pair of crutches. So obviously not what was being expected. And her father at this point thought it would be a really good time to introduce the glad game. So he said to her, "What can you be glad about?" looking at these crutches. So understandably she was a little stumped about this, and so he helped her out, and he said, "Well, you can be really glad that you don't need the crutches." So, big ask for a little girl. But then life got a little bit worse for her because her father died and she had to go and live with her very, very grumpy aunt in a village far away. However, what she did when she was in this village is she introduced the glad game to the villagers with various rates of success. But one of the stories I really liked is the one where she speaks to a kitchen maid who's feeling really grumpy. And when she asked her what's the matter, she said, "Oh, I'm really grumpy because it's a Monday. I hate Mondays." There's a song about that. So Pollyanna says, well, here this is idea about the glad game, and obviously the grumpy kitchen maid wasn't terribly chuffed with this. But what Pollyanna said to her was, you can be glad because it's another 6 days before there's another Monday. And that's one of the things that I have really held on to over the years. That if I'm having a grumpy day, it's likely to be another 6 days before I have another one. So those are mine about finding some meaning in my life that helps me through more difficult times. I wonder what yours are. Have a search, think about things that speak to you, that allow you to find meaning when the times are really tough. The P in improve is for prayer. And this is a really quite strange one, isn't it? Because people automatically associate this with faith, and that's not always the case. There is the idea that you are handing something over to something that feels bigger than you. But that can be many, many things for many people. So for some people, it is their faith. It is about being able to hand over what's happening to something that has a greater power, a greater meaning for them. Sometimes it can be nature. Sometimes it can be as simple as standing in nature and just taking the wonder in of something that feels so much larger than you and allowing yourself to give yourself over into nature. For other people, that just feels like way too big a stretch to do that. One of the things I really like is the serenity prayer. And normally at this part of the presentation, I would play a clip of Sinead O'Connor serenity prayer. But I've had varying degrees of success with that, so I'm not going to play it here. So the serenity prayer is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think for me that's really important. Working out what I can change and what I can't is really key for me in being able to regulate some of my emotions and how I react to some of the things that happen in my life. The other things that you might want to consider are a meditation to anything that feels bigger than you. Some cultures have traditions of respecting the ancestors, of talking to ancestors. There may be somebody in your life, an ancestor of yours, who you were particularly close to, you felt was a special person for you. Sometimes having a conversation with that person in your head can bring some level of relief. For other people, a prayer is like lyrics of a song. So sometimes the lyrics of a song have a special meaning, and just singing those or reciting those has more meaning for them. Have a think yourself about what has meaning for you. What prayer would you make for yourself? How would you use this to help you? R is for relaxing actions, and this is slightly different from relaxation. So yes, absolutely, go for progressive muscle relaxation, do the breathing exercises. All of those things are really important for relaxation. However, this is slightly different in that what you're being asked to think about is, what are relaxing actions for you? So what are the things that you do in your life that feel relaxing? So for instance, for somebody, it might be doing a jigsaw puzzle, word search, crosswords. Those sort of things are actions that they find relaxing. For other people, they're more active. They need to be doing something. It might be walking, it might be cycling. So whatever you're doing that you find relaxing. For some people it might be things like Tai Chi. It's a very slow movement that allows you to focus on your breathing. And for others it might be things like gardening. I like to study family history. So researching family history is something that I find relaxing. I can become completely absorbed in it, and that's part of the key with relaxing actions. You're becoming completely absorbed in that action, in that activity. And what that does is it distracts. It allows you to, takes you to a different place, so it changes your emotions. Sometimes there might not be enough time to do any of that, and maybe what you're doing is just grabbing a couple of minutes. So it might be making yourself a hot drink, cold drink, whatever your preference is. But if you're going to do that, do it mindfully. Really focus on making the best possible drink for yourself that you can. And at the same time that you're having that hot drink, you can either drink that mindfully, or you might want to doodle, or you might want to do some colouring in or a word search at the same time. Maybe what you need is just 2 minutes out to do something that's a relaxing action. So what I want you to do is I want you to just jot down some of the things that feel relaxing for you. The O is for one thing in the moment. This is hugely important because when we are highly emotional, when we're under a lot of stress, when we're feeling overwhelmed, we are either completely consumed by the past, or we are worrying and anxious about the future and anticipating threat. So in order to take the edge off those feelings, in order to tolerate some of that distress, what we need to do is bring ourselves back into the present. And one thing in the moment is one way of doing that. So what you're aiming to do is to focus your entire attention on what you are doing in that moment. So just try it now. Bring your attention entirely onto what you are doing in this moment. And you might say, well, I'm just sitting here watching. So focus on that. Focus on how you're sitting in the chair. Focus on what you're looking at, what you're noticing when you look at that. So you are focusing entirely on what you're doing in that moment, and then keep yourself in that moment. So keep bringing your brain back into that moment so that your mind is in the present. To give you an example of this as something really quite mundane is I do quite a lot of stapling in my job when I'm presenting the DBT skills and we're giving out handouts. And one very observant and wise person pointed out that actually my stapling was really quite erratic in the corners, and they were completely right. And I thought, what is going on here? So the next time I started stapling, I thought, I'm going to do one thing in the moment, and I'm going to staple these in a mindful way, because if I staple these in a mindful way, I am going to stay in the moment. And I became much more acutely aware of where the staple was going in, and it took me a far shorter amount of time than it did when I was rushing through it. So when I was rushing through it, the staples didn't always hit the paper, and sometimes they got stuck, and then I'd have to get one of those staple removers to remove them before I redid it again. So it used to take me forever because I was rushing. When I was doing one thing in the moment, I just became very focused on the piece of paper and the stapler, and I calmly just pushed the stapler down, and then I moved to the next one. And it became quite a restful experience. So I wouldn't say that I absolutely jump for joy now when I'm stapling lots of papers, but actually it really helps me to stay in the moment, and it's a reminder of how when we rush through life, actually sometimes it takes more time doing that than it does mindfully one thing in the moment. So just have a think now about some of the things that you rush that you could have a little experiment with, just slowing yourself down, doing one thing in the moment mindfully. The more we practice that, the easier it is to pull it out of the bag when we're feeling under stress. The V in improve is for vacation. Now, normally what happens is we get to the end of our tether and we do that slump, don't we, that we talked about in the other distress tolerance session. We do that slump and then we take ourselves off to bed, or we take ourselves away somewhere and we hibernate and we hide and we avoid things and we don't get things done, and then we don't feel very good about ourselves and we feel like we've wasted the day, and it just goes on and on and on, and it is not helpful. It's certainly not effective. So the idea with vacation and improve the moment is different, because this is planned and it's timed. We are making an informed decision to take a vacation, and that could last from 2 minutes to a day, no more than a day. So there's the rules, no more than a day. If you're taking a vacation from your distress, then a day is the maximum you've got, and it's got to be timed like that, and it's got to be planned. So instead of having a crumpled heap in your bedroom, just sort of staying there, I want you to look at how different it could be. Because actually she's doing exactly the same thing. She's lying down somewhere, but she's lying down somewhere that's pleasant and gives her a better experience. Equally, this person's just outside. She's just taking a moment. So she might be doing a 2-minute vacation there, just taking herself outside for 2 minutes to take the edge off some of those intense feelings. Now, if you do think, actually, do you know, things have got so bad, I need a vacation for a whole day, then plan it really well and build things into it so that you're doing things that you wouldn't normally. So this is where sort of like non-emotional box sets come in really handy. And it might be that you say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to watch a couple of episodes, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to do something small. And that might be that something small is I'm going to make myself some small snack to eat, make myself a drink. It may be that actually there's an awful lot of washing that's piled up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put one load on. And then I'm going to go back and I'm watch another 2 episodes. And then I'm going to take the washing out and I'm going to hang it up, or I'm going to put it in the tumble dryer, whatever you've got. So you're just doing one very small task in amongst your vacation. And at the same time, you might decide that actually I'm going to alert people that I'm taking a bit of vacation. I'm going to send everybody a message going, you know, I'm going to be busy for the next 6 hours or so. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Because you can send out those automated texts now, can't you? Which is really good. So plan it, time it, so that you're getting the maximum goodness out of your vacation time, so that you feel rested and restored when you come out, and you have a better chance of being able to cope with what's being thrown at you. Now, here's the heads up. If you're taking a vacation when you've got an assignment to hand in for a deadline on that day, your vacation time needs to be 2 minutes tops. Short amounts of vacation time, because otherwise the consequences are not going to be good, are they? You're going to actually make the situation worse. So think about, if you were going to plan a vacation day or even a vacation hour, what would you do? How would you structure it? If you jot it down now, then when it comes to a time when you need that vacation time, you won't have to waste precious time thinking about it. You'll have it all ready to hand. So the last letter in improve is E, and that's for encouragement. This is where we act as cheerleaders to ourselves. We make encouraging statements to ourselves. And the beauty of this is that the brain does not know the difference, which is amazing. So what we say to ourselves, the brain interprets as truth, even if it doesn't feel that way. So when we say to ourselves, I can do this, it doesn't really matter whether we can or not. Our brain is convinced we can. So just try it. Just sit there and say to yourself, I can do this. Make your voice stronger. I can do this. Obviously, you'd usually say it in your head, particularly if you're in a crowd. Try some other statements out. Find ones that speak to you. So, in this moment, I am doing the best I can. This too will pass. I can cope in this moment. I like this one. Breathe. This is a chapter, not my whole story. And then this one. I am doing well to manage anything in this moment. So anything I manage is remarkable. Obviously, Google is your friend here, because if you put in encouraging statements, quotes, whatever, it doesn't really matter, you will get floods of them. So jot down some that speak to you right now, and then Google a few more and write those down. Think about where you could put them. Can you put one on your phone? Can you have a list of encouraging statements on your phone? Would that help? Maybe there's a place you go when you're feeling really fed up and low, and having a list of those encouraging statements somewhere visible can really help. Just reminds you to be kind to yourself and give yourself some encouragement. And bear in mind, you do not have to believe it for it to help. So we have come to the end of pros and cons and improve. And again, I urge you to practice, 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 deliberate practice, planned practice. Evaluate some of the things that you're doing. Look at how effective are they? How helpful are they? Could I improve on them? Could I tweak them? The more we practice in a deliberate way, the more skilled we become. And think about encouraging statements or cartoons that you can use for you, so you can do it. I love that little one.